right, so hello, my name is Jeremy Hodges, and today I wanted to talk about UPnP and CGNAT and what basically the challenges in MDUs that I've come across over the years, about the past 10 years or so. And somebody had mentioned earlier today about perspective when troubleshooting, and my home network is actually set up exactly like an MDU. So I've actually lived these problems. So a lot of the times when you have a physical residential gateway, like you have a cable modem or maybe a Linksys or Netgear router at your house, it has a public IP address assigned to it, and it has UPnP support. And if you plug up or connect a game station up to it, like an Xbox, PlayStation, whatever, it will usually work fine. You'll get an open NAT type and you'll be able to play games, no problems. The problem in the multi-tenant venues is that they typically are deployed with enterprise gear, and that's basically designed to be configured by skilled IT people, and it usually lacks UPnP support. And in my experience, a lot of times there are not enough IP addresses, public IP addresses set up on those networks either, which makes it impossible to actually support the number of game devices that they have. The other problem that you'll run into is port address translation exhaustion, and that will make the game consoles very, very unhappy. And there are two things that have been designed, basically UPnP and CGNAT, that can help overcome these. So UPnP, basically the game console will request a port to be forwarded, and the system, if UPnP is enabled, it will forward that port, and then the game system will get an open NAT. We can also use CGNAT to get over the limited number of IPv4 addresses. Typically, you're going to run into three scenarios where, so on the left here, we have a strict NAT, and so outbound only, so the match fails. In the middle, we have at least one inbound, so we get, the match gets connected, and on the right, we have basically an open NAT type, and everything just works. You'll get connected, voice works, everything's happy. You can trash talk your opponents, and it works just fine. So strict, we basically have outbound traffic works, but there's no inbound connectivity. Basically, the Xbox, PlayStation, PC is not going to be happy. You won't be able to join matches, voice won't work. If you have moderate, some things will work. You'll be able to join matches, but voice may not work. We can use, basically it means that maybe static port forwarding has been set up, and maybe, but on an open, we have, basically everything's open. The system is either in a DMZ, it's behind UPnP, or maybe there's been some manual port configurations. And if that's the case, then everything will work fine. So just real quick, I'm going to go through the three main consoles, Xbox, PlayStation, and Nintendo Switch. So the Xbox is pretty straightforward. It tells you strict, moderate, or open, so it's really easy to figure out which one you have. And here are the ports that the Xbox typically wants to have open, assuming that these are like the standard ports, but other games can actually have other requirements that are not listed here. The PlayStation will give you Type 3, Type 2, and Type 1. Type 3 is going to be strict. Type 2 is generally where you're going to be and everything's going to work. Type 1, the only way that you're going to get Type 1 on the PlayStation is if you assign a public IP address directly to the system. But as long as you have Type 2, matches are going to work, voice is going to work, everything should work. Here's the ports for the PS5. And again, these may change depending on what game you're playing, but these are the general ones that you need to have open. The Nintendo Switch, of course, Nintendo took a different approach. So instead of three settings, strict, moderate, and open, we have Type A, B, C, D, and F. Type A is open, Type B is moderate, and Type C is strict. D and F, if you have either of those, nothing's going to work. Your multiplayer is not going to work. So the online games basically need inbound connectivity. And a lot of people assume that because the games are hosted online, the game servers are in the cloud, which may or may not be true. A lot of the games will use the cloud services for catalog purposes, but not the actual gameplay itself. So when you connect, to the cloud part is the matchmaking and the lobby services. And then once the match gets started, basically one of those consoles is picked as the host or a PC. And if they have a strict NAT, then nobody's going to be able to connect. Voice isn't going to work. So that means that the designated game host must have basically either a public IP address, be in a DMZ, or have port forward set up or UPnP enabled. And then, of course, in-game VoIP, that definitely requires those ports to be forward, otherwise it's not going to work. So game consoles on MDU, managed Wi-Fi. Usually what happens here is that the port forwards are going to be unmanageable. You're going to have to, somebody's going to have to go and manually create those port forwards for the students or the residents in this case. Now, if we turn on, if we preserve the source port with like the cone NAT, and we only have a single public IP address, then we actually can get a couple of consoles to work potentially. But I know like with Xboxes, it'll only use one of 5 ports. So once we've exceeded that number, then we're going to run into PAT exhaustion. In a perfect world, each unit or each room, each student would have basically same thing that we get with the physical residential gateway. They would have a public IP address. They would have UPnP enabled, so they would just plug in their console, connect to the Wi-Fi, and it will just work. And so, since we can't do that necessarily, the other thing we can do is we can create a bunch of BiNATs, a lot of BiNATs, or one-to-one NAT configurations. And ideally, we would have some form of automation to handle that. The other thing that happens is, in that scenario, students are not really able to go and create port forwards. So we've actually done something that automates this process, and it actually makes it, and like I said, I actually use this in my home, so this is something I actually use myself. So we've overcome these problems. And if you want to check it out, we have the free download for our software. Thank you.